Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene, where empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world. UUCE is located on the ancestral land of the Kalapuya people, whose descendants are now members of two Confederate tribes in Oregon. My name is Augie Sabini. I use the pronouns he, him, and his. And with me today are our minister, Rev. Jen Youngsun, our interim director of faith formation, and for children and youth, Sarah Sauter, our collaborative pianist who has just wowed you with some good stuff, Suzanne Giordano, our vocalists, Izzy Kreger and Bob Serins. And behind the scenes, working tech and holding this all together, is Kat Johnson. We gather in worship to find meaning and to live more deeply. Worship creates connections within, among, and beyond us, calling us to our better selves, calling us to live with wisdom and compassion. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we are glad you're here. And if you're visiting today, we'd love to hear from you and invite you to fill out a visitor's form as you feel called. The link is being dropped into chat right now.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday morning. I'm so glad to see you. My name is Jen Youngsun, and I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm very fortunate and honored to serve you as your minister. I just want to encourage all of you to please read the Weekly Connection, because if you don't, you're going to miss the news that the children and youth registration is now open. Classes start on October the 3rd. And you won't want to miss the fact that registration for small group connection circles, which we used to call small group ministry, is now open until September 26th. If you have any questions or you want more information or you just want to see what it's like, there's a drop-in information session today at 11:15 right after the service, and you can access it via the coffee hour link. And finally, I want to say congratulations and thank you to the book sale team, Diane Wooldridge, Bonnie Phipps, Judy Sawyer, Sue Craig, and Janet Barnes. They had a lot of volunteer helpers too, and so our thanks go out to them. Even with a little bit of rain that we had yesterday, they made $1,590. $1,590. Very well done. Congratulations to all of you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sarah Sauter, your interim director of faith formation. And my family is lighting the chalice today. This is my husband of 36 years, Ron Johnston. And we are reading from, remember this guy? The old faithful singing living tradition. We are reading number 461, We Must Be Saved. Nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime. Therefore, we are saved by hope. Nothing true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we are saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love.
In San Francisco, along Divisadero Street, the Adhan, call to prayer, is broadcast on speakers, calling Muslims to pray 5 times a day. In Needham, Massachusetts, the Unitarian Church there rings their 200-year-old bell every Sunday morning. In the Zen Center, the Buddhist teacher snaps the bamboo stick hard on a cold wood floor, a call to wake up to the truth of reality. We all need prompts and reminders to step out of the mundane and into the sacred. A call to prayer, a bell, a snap that will bring us back to our senses and back to ourselves. This is especially true these days when life overwhelms and hope is sometimes hard to find. Like many of you, I'm feeling all kinds of emotions these days, a bit overwhelmed and anxious and angry, and sometimes I just feel afraid. In those moments, I can slip down that rabbit hole of watching too much news and giving too much airtime to thoughts that don't help me to become the person I know I can be. And then a bell rings. A song sparks joy. A prayer lights my heart. We gather this morning from all corners of our town and from places far beyond. Drawn here by the circumstances of our lives, we seek a way to uncover more happiness, more peace, and more connection. Come, let us gather in hope. Come, let us worship together. I want to invite you now into a time of guided meditation. There is something in your life that is not serving you. Something in your life that you don't want. It's getting in the way and it's blocking your growth. It's something you want to let go of, but haven't really figured out how. And so I'm going to invite you to either do this in fact or just do it in your mind. But grab an object that's nearby. Maybe it's in your pocket or maybe it's on the table next to you. And in this object, place all of those things that no longer serve you. The things that maybe helped you in the past, but no longer help you. It was maybe useful then, but no longer. Place all of that into this object. And now there are two ways that you can let go of something. One is you can just chuck it. You can just toss this. You can take it somewhere and throw it. You can burn it. You can dig a hole and bury it. That's one way of letting something go. Another way is to simply place the object lightly in your palm, like this. And this is a different kind of letting go. This is an allowing. Sometimes those things that are no longer useful to us and things that are vexing to us and things that we don't want in our lives, sometimes we don't have a choice. They're there and we can't really throw it away. But can we allow? Can we simply let it be without taking too much room in our lives, to allow with as much skillful ease as we can? May it be so.
This song was commissioned in 1999 by the First Unitarian Church of Dallas for their hymnal supplement published for their centennial celebration. The composer, Shelley Jackson Denham, took the opportunity to write a piece based on children's yearning for truth, respect, and engagement with adults. In keeping with the philosophy that children are watching, what are they learning? Then I may learn, or when I am frightened, is meant as a reminder that all children deserve and need compassion, acceptance, and commitment, and that they often learn to both give and receive these essential elements of relationship through the simple act of observation. In my time working with the youth at UUCE, I've often seen that relationship reversed, that it's not the adult leadership or presence that they are learning to emulate, but rather us, them, that we may learn to show compassion, acceptance, and commitment in newly possible ways. Now please join us in singing hymn 1012, When I Am Frightened.
This morning's reading is by Clarissa Pincola Estes. Mestiza Latina, that means Native American Mexican Spanish. A poet, psychoanalyst, and a person in her 70s. Refuse to fall down. If you cannot refuse to fall down, refuse to stay down. If you cannot refuse to stay down, lift your heart toward heaven and like a hungry beggar ask that it be filled. You may be pushed down, you may be kept from rising, but no one can keep you from lifting your heart toward heaven, only you. It is in the middle of misery that so much becomes clear. The one who says nothing good came of this is not listening yet.
Maybe it's because I was born in the fall, but this is the time of year when I feel the most at home. Tuesday is Mabon, marking the middle point between summer solstice and the winter solstice. So at the end of June, the night began to grow little by little, and so will keep growing until December and the longest night. We're right in the middle of that growing night. We can feel it in the air and in the rain. We can see it in the swifts making their yearly migration and in the change of the colors in the trees. But this fall is different again. Yesterday, I was talking with my friend Sherry, who works at the hospital where we were chaplains together. Normally, she's a very bubbly, positive personality, but yesterday, Sherry sounded drained. She told me that every single one of the ICU beds is filled with a younger, unvaccinated COVID patient. One of the families that she saw yesterday at the end of her shift was so thankful for her presence that the father reached out a bare hand to shake hers. This one simple act of human connection that we've been so missing. And she quickly calculated the risks in her head and she reached out and held his hand. You know, I hate it that she had to make that calculation. And I'm angry because I've already lost 2 chaplain friends and I fear for her safety. And I'm angry with the people who refuse the vaccination and either do not care or do not care to know how much harm they are doing to chaplains, to housekeeping staff, to the hospital electrician. Of course, the pandemic is just one of the things that adds to life feeling so emotionally draining these days. We also know that anyone who has had past experiences of trauma may be feeling these things even with more intensity. So as I've talked to you all throughout the week, I hear the weariness in your voice. I hear grief over all kinds of losses. I hear the fear, and sometimes I hear the edge of despair. And so what kind of spiritual practices will comfort us in these days of growing nights? The wise ones through the ages have explored the paradox of darkness, how no one is spared the darkness, and yet somehow we all survive. how one can see so clearly in times of turmoil, how the night will give you a horizon further than you can see. That's Irish poet David Whyte. That's his line. And to find this kind of horizon requires effort and a kind of spiritual toughness. That's resilience, showing when you refuse to stay down that that's where your strength is. Refuse to stay down. And maybe you'll give yourself a few days to rest. And then one day you say, okay, I'm ready to get up. On other days, though, all you can see is the night. And there is no getting up on those days. And yet you refuse to give up because you know that there is one thing that you can do. You can turn your heart toward heaven and ask that it be filled. No one can stop you from doing that. It's so easy to get knocked down these days. If I want to be knocked down, all I have to do is open my news feed. Tens of thousands of Haitian migrants fleeing an unstable country and now suffering from heat and dehydration. A group of brave Olympic athletes forced to repeat stories of traumatic abuse because authorities did not protect them. More catastrophic news about rising global temperatures and a massive hole in the ozone layer. Adolescents experiencing more anxiety and depression because of social media, and corporations that know the harm they're doing. And the number 673,000. That's how many we have lost from this pandemic just in the United States. It's a number that I can't even wrap my head around. We've been hearing the word existential more than ever before. In fact, in 2019, that word was the word of the year. No wonder I feel fear. I mean, we're dealing with matters that threaten our very existence. How easy it is these days to fall into doom. I want to tell you about Michael Hay. He's a college student in California who grew up in a very polluted city in China. He was only 10 years old when he was convinced that he would be doomed to living with poisonous water and poisonous air. He sees this sense of doom in many of his friends and peers. They have all but given up because individual action, it just makes no difference. And corporations are too powerful, governments are too corrupt, and there are no more trustworthy institutions. These younger adults also seem hesitant about planning their future. I mean, to them, the future seems so precarious, so unpredictable. What does it look like when we live out of fear and worry and helplessness? When we speak from fear, we often push people away, even though that's the last thing we want. We want to be closer. When we make decisions out of fear, we end up with a smaller life than what is possible. And when we let fear take the driver's seat, life narrows to a single lane that doesn't allow for the spaciousness of courage. And what of despair and hopelessness? Boy, it just takes the wind right out of you, doesn't it? There's no creative energy, there's no passion. Despair disconnects us from life and so often leads to depression and isolation and death. When life knocks you down, you're supposed to get right back up, right? Isn't that what they teach us? We're not supposed to be afraid of anything either. And we should always have hope. I can hear Clarissa Pinkola Estes answering me with her poem. No, she says, no, it's not that cut and dried. Sometimes you're gonna find yourself lying on the floor in the dark. In those moments, ask yourself, what else is possible? Can I do just this one little thing? And sometimes that little thing is taking a shower. Sometimes it's picking up the phone, reaching out to someone. And sometimes all you can manage is just to turn your heart toward heaven. Heaven, heaven. Unitarian Universalists set aside the traditional Christian idea of heaven a long time ago. We decided that preaching the fear of hell and the promise of heaven was not a very good foundation for a religious movement. But you know what? We still talk about heaven. In the late 1800s, a progressive movement known as the social gospel came into being. It described heaven as a situation on earth where all who are hungry are fed, where there is peace for all peoples and reverence for the earth. And because ours are the only hands that can do this work, we're called to work endlessly to build the kingdom of heaven on earth. It is an exhausting proposition. Today, Unitarian Universalists have another way of understanding heaven. Now, like the social gospel, we don't see heaven as a place located somewhere out there. Heaven is here. Heaven is now. The difference is that UUs believe that our work is not to create it, but to uncover it. Instead of striving and striving to build a more perfect world or waiting until we die to see paradise, we find heaven here and now in countless acts of compassion, in the beauty that wakes our senses, in the power of love that heals the broken. There is so much here that needs our care. And so while we uncover the good in our earthly paradise, we also care for parts of the world that have been harmed. And the only way to do that is to turn toward the world and not away from it. This is UU heaven, a deep reverence for life here in this world. And so our work is to wake up to the bounty that is already here and to magnify those things that are good. This means that our work is not to imagine a far-off perfection and certainly not to give up on this world. Young Pueblo is the pen name of a young Ecuadorian poet activist who refuses to give up and refuses to give in to the doomist worldview. He sees clearly the damage, he knows the harm, and he also sees glimpses of heaven. He says, "You can tell humanity is maturing because more and more of us are saying no to harm. We are taking the time to examine our bias, moving our love from being selective to unconditional, and expanding our idea of what is possible. More of us are healing ourselves and actively helping to heal the world." This is real, effortful work. To tune out the negativity, to push against cynicism, and to actively look for places where life is blooming. And surely this is such a place. May it be ever so. Amen. Now is the time in our service where we're going to open the chat and invite you to share a little part of your life. What has been happening this last week? Have you experienced amazing things? Is your heart breaking? This community is a community of sharing, the community of love and support. And so I know that sometimes you have things that you're holding close and don't feel like you're ready to share with anyone else. But I hope that as your connections to this congregation grows, that you will consider placing something in the chat and just letting people know how you are. Thank you so much for sharing so much joy for rain. That was most of the chat. And today's prayer is a poem by Denise Levertov, and I think it speaks to today's theme very well. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with the beasts and the flowers, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet. No, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended, too much hurt that we have done to each other that must be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would only join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must be completed. So much is in bud. Amen. We extinguish our chalice this morning, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we will carry in our hearts until we are together again. And so now go into this day, go into your week. Remember that this church loves you, and we can't wait to all be together again. Go in peace, my friends. Go in love.